I opened my late father's safe, and everything my mother told me was a lie. Part 1. The key he left behind. I never thought a tiny brass key could destroy an entire family. If my father had simply left me money, or his watch, or the old pickup truck sitting in our garage, my life would probably be normal today. Instead, he left me a key no one was supposed to know existed, especially my mother. Looking back, I realized the truth had been sitting in front of me for years. I just never knew where to look. My name is Daniel. I'm 27 years old. Until 6 months ago, I thought I had a normal family. Not perfect, just normal. Mom and Dad argued like every married couple. My older brother, Ryan, moved out years ago and rarely came home. Family dinners were awkward. Birthdays felt forced. Christmas always ended with someone leaving early. But I assumed that's how most families were. I never imagined every smile around that table was hiding a secret. Dad died on a cold November morning. Heart attack. No warning. No goodbye. One phone call changed everything. I still remember dropping my coffee when the hospital called. By the time I arrived, he was already gone. The funeral happened 4 days later. Gray skies, cold wind. Everyone wore black. Neighbors, old co-workers, people I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Everyone kept saying the same thing. I'm so sorry. He was a good man. He loved his family. I thanked them, smiled politely, pretended I was okay. Inside, I felt completely empty. Then something strange happened. As everyone was leaving, Dad's lawyer approached me. Not my mother, not Ryan, me. Daniel, he said quietly, your father wanted me to give you this. He handed me a small sealed envelope. Nothing else. No explanation. Just my name written across the front in Dad's handwriting. I didn't open it immediately. It felt wrong, like hearing someone's voice after they'd already died. I slipped it into my coat pocket. Mom noticed. What was that? The lawyer gave me something. What? I don't know. She forced a smile. I'm sure it's nothing important. Looking back, that smile wasn't comforting. It looked terrified. That night, after everyone went home, I sat alone in Dad's office. The room still smelled like coffee, old books, and cedar wood. His reading glasses were still sitting beside an unfinished crossword puzzle. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it, except he wasn't coming back. I finally opened the envelope. Inside, there was only one sentence. When you're ready, open the safe. Trust no one until you do. Underneath the note was a tiny brass key. No explanation, no address, no combination, nothing. Just the key. I stared at it for nearly an hour. What safe? Dad never owned a safe. At least, not one I knew about. The next morning, I asked Mom. She didn't even let me finish. What key? The one Dad left me. I don't know anything about a key. He mentioned a safe. Her face changed instantly. Not sadness. Not confusion. Fear. Real fear. She grabbed my wrist. Hard. So listen carefully. Her voice was shaking. If you love this family, you'll forget your father ever wrote that note. Then she walked away. That should have been enough. I should have listened. Instead, her reaction convinced me the safe was real. Over the next few weeks, I searched the house, Dad's office, the basement, the attic, every closet, every cabinet. Nothing. Ryan came over a few times to help Mom with paperwork. Every time I mentioned Dad's note, he immediately changed the subject. One afternoon, I caught him standing alone in Dad's office, holding the same envelope. He looked startled when he saw me. You shouldn't keep reading that. Why? He hesitated, then quietly answered. Because some doors can't be closed once you open them. Before I could ask anything else, he left. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Eventually, life started moving again. I returned to work, Stopped thinking about the key. Almost convinced myself Dad had written that note during one of his paranoid moments. Until one rainy Saturday, the power went out. The old house became completely silent. Mom was visiting her sister. I stayed behind to clean the garage. Dad had always refused to let anyone organize it. He called it my kingdom. Most of it was junk. Rusty tools, old paint cans, broken fishing rods, boxes filled with receipts from the 1990s. Hours passed. Then, I noticed something strange. Behind an old metal shelf, there was fresh concrete. Everything else looked decades old, except one square section of the floor. It looked new. Dad hated renovating. He never fixed anything unless he absolutely had to. Why would he suddenly pour fresh concrete? Curiosity took over. I moved the shelf, knelt down, ran my hand across the surface. Then I heard it. A hollow sound. Not concrete. Metal. Hidden underneath. My heart started racing. I grabbed Dad's old hammer, carefully chipped away the thin layer covering the square. Piece by piece, the concrete crumbled, until finally, I saw it. A thick steel door, embedded directly into the floor, a combination dial, and a tiny keyhole, exactly the size of the brass key sitting in my pocket. For a long moment, I just stared. Dad hadn't imagined anything. The safe was real, which meant everything else might be real too. I reached into my pocket, wrapped my fingers around the key. The metal felt ice cold, even though my hand was sweating. I looked toward the empty doorway. The house was silent, but for the first time in my life, it felt like someone was watching me. I slowly lifted the key toward the lock, and that's when I heard the front door slam upstairs. Someone had come home. Part 2. The safe. The front door slammed shut. Hard. The sound echoed through the entire house. I froze. The brass key was still between my fingers. Every instinct told me to cover the safe and pretend I'd never found it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the hallway. Then my mother's voice. Daniel. I swallowed. I'm in the garage. She walked closer. For a second, I thought she had seen everything. But when she opened the garage door, the metal shelf was still blocking most of the hole in the floor. She smiled. You scared me. I thought someone had broken in. I was just cleaning. Her eyes scanned the room. Then, they landed on the dusty hammer in my hand. What are you doing with that? Oh. I laughed awkwardly. I found an old nail sticking out. She stared for another few seconds, long enough to make me uncomfortable. Finally she nodded. I'm making dinner. Then she left. I waited until I heard her footsteps disappear upstairs. Only then did I breathe again. I quietly closed the garage door, locked it, turned off the lights. Only one small flashlight remained. The beam pointed directly at the hidden steel door. The safe looked old, very old. The edges were covered in rust. The company logo had almost completely faded away. Whatever was inside had probably been there for decades. I inserted the key. It slid in perfectly. One click. Nothing else. The combination dial still needed to be opened. I sighed. Of course it wouldn't be that easy. I searched every drawer in Dad's workbench. Nothing. Old screws, receipts, flashlights, batteries. No combination. Then I remembered something. Dad never threw away notebooks. He wrote everything down. Every expense. Every repair. Every fishing trip. Maybe he wrote the code somewhere. I spent nearly 3 hours going through dusty boxes. Page after page. Oil changes. Mortgage payments. Garden plans. Shopping lists. Then, inside an old leather notebook, I found a folded photograph. It was me, about 5 years old, standing between Mom and Dad. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary, until I turned it over. For numbers, written in black ink. 1908, 42 to 11. No explanation, just numbers. I stared at them. Were they dates? Coordinates? A phone number? Then I looked back at the safe. For groups. For numbers. My heart skipped. Could it really be that simple? I slowly turned the dial. 19. 8. 42. 11. The mechanism clicked. Once. Twice. Then. Silence. I grabbed the handle. Pulled. Nothing. Locked. I cursed under my breath. Wrong code. Or maybe wrong order. For the next hour, I tried every possible combination. 19-08-42-11. 11-42-08-19. 08-19-11-42. Nothing. Every attempt ended with the same heavy metallic resistance. The safe refused to open. Frustrated, I sat on the garage floor. The flashlight flickered. I looked again at Dad's photograph. Something suddenly caught my attention. Dad's watch. The time. It showed exactly 7:35. Not because the watch was working. Because the hands had been deliberately positioned there. Dad hated photographs. He always adjusted his watch before taking one. He used to joke, "If you ever lose track of time, look at the watch." I suddenly remembered something he'd said years ago. The obvious answer is usually the wrong one. I looked closer. Behind the family photo. Barely visible. Someone had written tiny letters. Clockwise. I almost laughed. The dial. I had been turning it the wrong direction. Hands shaking. I reset everything. This time, I followed the arrows engraved beside the dial. 19. 8. 42. 11. Click. Click. A deep metallic sound echoed inside the safe. The handle moved. I pulled. The steel door slowly opened. Dust drifted into the air. The smell inside reminded me of old paper and cedar wood. The flashlight revealed shelves. 3 of them, each filled with carefully organized boxes. No money, no gold, no jewelry, just documents. Hundreds of them. On the very top, there was a single white envelope. My name, again, written in Dad's handwriting. I opened it immediately. Inside was another letter. Daniel, if you've opened this safe, it means I've already failed to tell you the truth myself. Everything inside exists because one day, I knew someone would try to erase what really happened. Before you read another page, promise me one thing. Don't confront your mother. Not yet. Because if she realizes you've found this, she will destroy everything else. A chill ran through my body. Destroy what? What could possibly be so dangerous? Beneath the letter, there were dozens of folders, each labeled with a year. Every year of my life. One folder immediately caught my eye. 2004. The year I turned 8. I opened it. Inside was a hospital report. At first, I didn't understand what I was reading. Then, one sentence made my blood run cold. Patient requested complete confidentiality from spouse. Spouse. Mom. Dad had hidden medical records from her. Why? The next document was even stranger. A bank transfer. Every month. For 17 years. The same amount. Sent to someone named Evelyn Harper. I had never heard that name before. Not once. Not in my entire life. Who was she? Why had Dad secretly sent her thousands of dollars every month? Then I found photographs. Dozens of them. Dad standing outside a small White House. Dad talking to an elderly woman. Dad holding a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. He looked happy. The happiest I'd ever seen him. Yet I had absolutely no idea who she was. My mind raced. Was she another family? Another daughter? Had Dad lived a second life all these years? Nothing made sense anymore. Then, I heard something upstairs. A drawer opening. Footsteps. Fast. Much faster than before. My mother's voice echoed through the hallway. Panicked. Daniel. No answer. She called again. Louder this time. Daniel. Then, another voice. Ryan. When was the last time you saw the key? Silence. My stomach dropped. They weren't looking for me. They were looking for the key. I switched off the flashlight instantly. The garage disappeared into darkness. I barely had time to close the safe door halfway before I heard footsteps coming down the basement stairs. Someone stopped on the other side of the garage door. No one spoke for several terrifying seconds. The only sound I could hear was someone breathing, standing just a few feet away. Then, the doorknob slowly began to turn. Part 3. The name that changed everything. The doorknob slowly turned. I stopped breathing. Every muscle in my body locked in place. The flashlight was off. The garage was almost completely dark. Only a faint beam of moonlight slipped through the dusty window above the workbench. The handle moved another inch. Then, it stopped. Ryan's voice came from the other side. "Daniel." I stayed silent. Another pause. Then my mother spoke. "I told you he wasn't down here." Ryan didn't answer immediately. For a moment, I thought he somehow knew I was standing only a few feet away. Finally, he sighed. "Maybe you're right." Their footsteps slowly faded. The front door closed. A car started outside. The engine disappeared into the distance. I waited another 10 minutes before moving. My legs were shaking so badly I had to grab the workbench just to stand. The safe was still half open. The papers inside suddenly felt less like family records, and more like evidence. I knew one thing for certain. If my mother was searching for the key, then she already knew the safe existed, which meant Dad hadn't been hiding the truth from everyone. He had been hiding it from her. I couldn't leave the documents there. Not anymore. I grabbed Dad's old duffel bag and began filling it. Every folder, every photograph, every envelope, even the old cassette tapes tucked into the back corner. When I reached the bottom shelf, I noticed something I had missed before, a small wooden box. Unlike everything else, it wasn't dusty, almost as if Dad had touched it shortly before he died. There was no lock, just a tiny brass plate. It read, "Only after you know her name." Her name? I frowned. What did that even mean? I zipped the bag shut. Before leaving, I carefully closed the safe again, covered it with the broken pieces of concrete, pushed the heavy metal shelf back into place. If someone returned tomorrow, they wouldn't notice anything had changed. At least, I hoped so. I drove straight to my apartment. It was nearly 2 in the morning. Rain hammered against the windshield. Every red traffic light felt like an hour. For the first time in my life, I locked every door, closed every curtain, then emptied the entire duffel bag onto my living room floor. Hundreds of documents scattered everywhere. I made coffee. I had a feeling I wasn't going to sleep. Around 3:30 in the morning, I noticed something strange. Every folder had been carefully organized. Medical records, property deeds, insurance papers, bank statements. Dad had labeled everything, except one folder. It had no year, no title, nothing, just a faded blue cover. Inside, there was only a single photograph. The same little girl I'd seen earlier. She was smiling, holding an old stuffed rabbit. On the back, Dad had written 4 words: "Protect her at all costs." I turned the picture over again. Nothing else. Who was she? Why had he written that? The next item made my heart race. A birth certificate. I unfolded it carefully. The child's name wasn't mine. It wasn't Ryan's either. It belonged to a girl named Emily Harper. Date of birth: March 14th. She would be 23 now. Her mother's name: Evelyn Harper. The same woman receiving money from Dad every month. I searched for the father's name. Blank. Completely empty. I stared at the paper. Had Dad fathered another child? It was the obvious conclusion. But something didn't fit. Dad documented everything. Why would he hide only this? Then I found another envelope. This one wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Ryan. The seal had never been opened. I hesitated. Dad clearly intended my brother to read it. Not me. But after everything I'd discovered, I wasn't sure any rules still mattered. I carefully opened it. Inside, one handwritten page. Ryan. If Daniel is reading this instead of you, then something has gone terribly wrong. If that happens, tell him the truth before your mother does. Promise me, because once she starts talking, he'll never know which memories are real anymore. I read those lines 3 times. My mother. Again. Everything pointed back to her. Not Dad. Not Ryan. Her. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Ryan. I almost didn't answer. Hey. His voice sounded exhausted. You left pretty quickly yesterday. I had work. Silence. Then he asked, did you ever use Dad's key? I froze. For 2 seconds. I forgot how to speak. No. You sure? Yeah. Another pause. Then, if you ever do, call me first. The line went dead. That afternoon, I made a decision. I needed answers that weren't buried in folders. The documents listed an address beside every payment to Evelyn Harper. A small town, almost 4 hours away. I typed it into my GPS, packed the duffel bag, and started driving. The highway stretched endlessly through fields and forests. The rain had finally stopped. Gray clouds hung low over everything. The farther I drove, the more nervous I became. What if I was about to meet Dad's second family? What if everything I believed about him was false? By sunset, I reached the address. A quiet neighborhood. Old houses. White fences. Children riding bicycles. Nothing unusual. The address led me to a modest blue house at the end of the street. The mailbox still read, Harper. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes, trying to build the courage to knock. Finally, I walked to the porch, raised my hand, and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a voice behind me. You have his eyes. I spun around. Across the street, an elderly woman stood watering her flowers. She wasn't smiling. She was staring at me, as if she'd been expecting this moment for years. I'm sorry? She slowly crossed the road, stopped only a few feet away. Then she whispered, I knew this day would come. What do you mean? She looked at the house, then back at me. Your father promised he'd tell you before he died. My chest tightened. You knew my father? A sad smile appeared on her face. I knew him for 23 years. She took a deep breath, then said the sentence that shattered everything I'd believed. The man who raised you wasn't hiding another family. She paused, her eyes filled with tears. He was protecting one. Part 4. The house my father never told me about. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. The elderly woman looked at me with the kind of sadness that only comes from carrying someone else's secret for far too long. The man who raised you wasn't hiding another family. He was protecting one. Those words echoed in my head. What does that even mean? I asked. She looked around the quiet street before motioning toward her porch. Come inside. Her house smelled like fresh tea and old books. Family photographs covered nearly every wall. Children, grandchildren, birthdays, vacations, ordinary memories. She sat down slowly, placing 2 cups of tea on the table. My name is Margaret. I've lived across the street for 41 years. I knew your father long before you were born. I leaned forward. Then tell me who Evelyn Harper is. Margaret sighed. She was my daughter. I blinked. And Emily was my granddaughter. My heartbeat quickened. So Dad really had another daughter? Margaret immediately shook her head. No. He loved Emily like she was his own. But she wasn't his child. I frowned. Then why was he sending money every month? Margaret stared at the steam rising from her tea. Because he made a promise. A promise to a dying friend. She stood up and walked toward an old cabinet. From the top drawer, she removed a faded photograph. For young people stood together. That, a woman I recognized as Evelyn, another man, and my mother. I froze. Mom looked years younger. She was smiling. All 4 of them looked inseparable. What is this? Margaret placed the picture in front of me. Before they married. Your parents and Evelyn were best friends. Nothing made sense anymore. If they were all friends, why did nobody ever mention her? Margaret looked away. Because after what happened, everyone agreed never to speak about it again. She opened another drawer. This time, she pulled out a newspaper. 24 years old. The headline read, "Local businessman killed in highway accident." The photograph beneath the headline showed the man standing beside Dad in the old picture. His name, Michael Harper, Evelyn's husband, Emily's father. Michael and your father owned a construction company together. They built everything together. They trusted each other. Then one rainy night, Michael never came home, according to the newspaper. His car had gone off a bridge during a storm. The police ruled it an accident. Case closed. I looked back at Margaret. You don't believe that? She shook her head. No. Neither did your father. I felt a chill run down my spine. What are you saying? Margaret hesitated. Your father spent the rest of his life trying to prove Michael didn't die by accident. I stared at her. Why? Because. She looked directly into my eyes. He believed someone wanted Michael dead. Silence filled the room. Outside. Children laughed somewhere down the street. Inside. Everything suddenly felt heavy. Dad never told the police? He tried. They ignored him. He hired investigators. They found nothing. He kept searching anyway. For 23 years. Margaret reached into another folder. Inside were receipts. Private investigator invoices, maps, photographs, phone records, dozens of them. Dad had spent thousands of dollars. Every year, searching. The monthly payments to Evelyn suddenly made sense. He wasn't supporting a secret family. He was helping the family of his dead best friend. So why hide all of this from us? I asked quietly. Margaret didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked toward the living room window. You remember your father's funeral? Of course. Were there many people there? Yes. She nodded. Did you notice the man standing near the back? The one wearing a gray coat? I tried to remember. There were a lot of people. He left before the service ended. I don't remember. Margaret slowly turned around. He wasn't there to say goodbye. He was making sure your father was really dead. A cold wave rushed through my body. What? He watched this house too. For years. He watched Evelyn. He watched Emily. And after your father died, he disappeared. I suddenly remembered something. Inside the safe, Dad had hidden several photographs. Some looked random, but one had always seemed strange. A blurry picture of a man standing beside a gas station. Gray coat, hands in his pockets, his face partially hidden. At the time, I assumed Dad was just photographing strangers. Now, I wasn't so sure. Margaret noticed my expression. You've seen him. I think. I found a photograph. She closed her eyes. So your father really left you everything. I reached into my backpack, pulled out the photo, placed it on the table. Margaret's hands immediately started trembling. It's him. You know him? She nodded once. I never knew his name. But Michael argued with him. The day before he died, my mouth went dry. What were they arguing about? I don't know. But your father arrived just as it ended. He never forgave himself for leaving. He believed if he'd stayed, Michael would still be alive. I looked at the photograph again. The man's face was almost impossible to identify, until I noticed something in the background. A storefront window. Its reflection showed the man's profile from another angle. Dad had noticed it. Someone had circled the reflection with a red marker. Then I saw something else. Written underneath the picture. Dad's handwriting. Ryan knows. I felt like the air had disappeared from the room. Ryan knows? Knows what? About the man? About Michael? About the investigation? Or about something even bigger? My phone suddenly vibrated. Ryan. Calling. Again. I answered. Before I could speak, he shouted, Daniel, you need to leave that town. My stomach tightened. How do you know where I am? Silence. Then he whispered, because Mom followed you. I jumped to my feet. What? Ryan's voice was shaking. Listen carefully. She knows you've opened the safe. She knows you're with Margaret. Get out of that house. Right now. I looked through the front window. A black SUV had just turned onto the street. It stopped directly in front of Margaret's house. The driver's door slowly opened, and my mother stepped out. She wasn't alone. A tall man wearing a gray coat climbed out after her. The exact same gray coat from my father's photograph. Part 5. My mother was never the person I thought she was. The black SUV rolled to a stop in front of Margaret's house. The engine shut off. No one moved. For several long seconds. The entire street was silent. Then my mother stepped out. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She looked calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people have when they've already decided how the conversation is going to end. She slowly adjusted her coat and looked directly at the front door. Then the passenger stepped out. Gray coat. Tall. Broad shoulders. The same man from my father's photograph. 23 years later. He hadn't changed much. Only older. More tired. But it was him. My father had spent decades trying to find this man. And now, he was standing outside. Margaret looked through the curtains. Her face turned pale. It's him, she whispered. He came back. I looked at her. You know his name? She nodded slowly. Victor Lawson. The name meant nothing to me. Yet the moment she said it, I knew I'd never forget it. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. I answered immediately. Daniel. Don't open the door. Ryan. Just listen. His breathing was uneven. I've spent 15 years protecting Dad's secret. I don't have time to explain everything. They think you only found the documents. But if they discover you also found. He stopped. The recording. They'll do anything to get it. The recording? There should be a cassette. I found several. No. He interrupted. Not those. A black cassette. No label. If you have it, hide it. Then the call disconnected. I immediately opened my backpack. Folders. Photographs. Letters. 3 brown cassette tapes. Then, at the very bottom, a completely black cassette. No writing. No label. Exactly as Ryan described. My heart started pounding. Dad had hidden it beneath everything else. As if he knew it would be the most important piece. A loud knock echoed through the house. 3 slow knocks. Nobody spoke. Another knock. This time louder. Margaret grabbed my arm. Don't answer. My mother spoke from outside. Daniel. I know you're in there. Her voice sounded strangely gentle. You don't understand what you're doing. I just want to talk. I almost laughed. Talk? She'd spent my entire life hiding things from me. Now, suddenly, she wanted honesty? Victor's voice came next. Deep, cold. Open the door. We don't have much time. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. He didn't sound threatening. He sounded afraid. Afraid of something else. Margaret slowly walked toward the back hallway. There isn't much time. She opened a narrow closet. Hidden behind old coats was another door. I always hoped we'd never need this. She pushed it open. Stone steps disappeared underground. A tunnel. She nodded. It was built during the war. It leads behind the church. My father dug it. Go. What about you? I'll keep them busy. I'm not leaving you. She smiled sadly. Your father once told me. If this day ever came, you would argue exactly like he did. Another knock shook the house. This time, Victor shouted. We know he has the tape. Tape. Not documents. Not letters. The tape. Ryan was right. Whatever was on it was worth everything. Margaret pushed me toward the stairs. Go! Reluctantly. I descended into darkness. She closed the wooden hatch above me. The last thing I heard was my mother saying, Margaret, this is your last chance. The tunnel smelled of damp earth. The ceiling was barely high enough to stand. I used my phone flashlight. The walls were reinforced with old wooden beams. Every few steps, I could hear muffled voices above me. Then, a crash. Someone had forced the front door open. I started running. The tunnel stretched farther than I expected. Nearly 5 minutes later, I climbed another staircase. A rusted metal hatch opened into an abandoned storage shed behind an old church. Rain had started again. I stepped outside. The town looked deserted. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. No one spoke. Then, Dad's voice. Not Liv. A recording. Played automatically. Daniel, if you're hearing this. Then Ryan failed. Or I did. I pray I'm wrong. My knees nearly gave out. It was another recording. Not from the cassette. From my voicemail. Scheduled. Dad had somehow arranged for it to be sent years after his death. If you reach this point, don't trust what you've learned. Because the truth is bigger than Michael. Bigger than Victor. Bigger than your mother. There is one person I never wanted involved. If Ryan tells you, don't believe him until you hear the black tape. The message ended. I stared at my phone. Dad had just warned me about Ryan, the only person trying to help me. Lightning flashed across the sky. I looked down at the cassette still in my hand. Every answer seemed to be inside it, but I had no way to play it. Then I remembered Dad's old cabin, the fishing cabin by Lake Mercer. He kept an ancient cassette player there. No one else knew. At least, I hope so. I jumped into my car, started the engine. The tires spun on the wet road. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The black SUV burst out from behind the church. Victor was driving. My mother sat beside him. They had found the tunnel. And now, they were following me. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. Rain hammered the windshield. The distance between us disappeared with every second. Ahead, the narrow mountain road twisted toward the lake. Behind me, the SUV's headlights grew brighter. Much brighter. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. If they caught me before I reached the cabin, I'd never know what my father had died trying to protect. And somehow, deep down, I had the terrifying feeling that my father's death had never been a heart attack at all. Part 6. The Black Tape. The road to Lake Mercer was narrow, wet, and almost completely empty. Rain slammed against my windshield so hard that the world outside looked like a blur of headlights and shadows. Behind me, the black SUV followed. Not too close. Not too far. Just close enough to remind me they were there. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every turn felt like a mistake waiting to happen. The lake road had no guardrails in several places. Just dark trees on one side and a steep drop on the other. I kept thinking about Dad. About the safe. About the sentence he had written. Trust no one until you do. At first, I thought he meant my mother. Then Victor. Then Ryan. Now I realized the worst part. Maybe he meant everyone. The cabin appeared after the last bend. Small. Dark. Forgotten. It sat near the edge of the lake, surrounded by pine trees and fog. Dad used to bring me there when I was little. Fishing trips. Old board games. Burnt pancakes. Quiet mornings. It had always felt safe. That night, it looked like the last place on earth. I killed the headlights before turning into the dirt driveway. The SUV was still behind me. I had maybe 1 minute, maybe less. I ran inside. The door stuck, swollen from the rain. For a terrifying second, it refused to open. Then it gave way. The cabin smelled like dust, wood smoke, and old memories. I didn't turn on the main lights. I knew exactly where Dad kept the cassette player. Bottom drawer, under the old radio, wrapped in a blue towel. My hands shook as I plugged it in. Nothing. I slapped the side. Still nothing. Come on, I whispered. Please. Then the little red power light flickered on. Outside. Tires crunched over gravel. They were here. I shoved the black cassette inside. Pressed play. For 3 seconds. There was only static. Then Dad's voice filled the room. Not weak. Not old. Younger. Angry. Terrified. Michael, don't sign anything. A second voice answered. I already told you I don't have a choice. Michael Harper. Dead for 23 years. Dad spoke again. You do have a choice. We go to the police. Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. The police? You still think this is about business? Then another voice entered the recording. Calm. Controlled. A woman's voice. My mother. Michael, please. You're making this harder than it needs to be. My stomach turned cold. Mom had been there. The day before Michael died. The tape continued. Michael shouted something I couldn't make out. Then Victor's voice cut through the static. You were warned, Michael said. If anything happens to me, Robert has everything. Robert, my father. Dad suddenly said, what everything? Michael lowered his voice. The contracts, the names, the accounts, and the proof your wife helped them. The room seemed to tilt. My mother helped them. Helped who? Dad's voice shook. What did you just say? Then my mother cried out. Robert, I can explain. But Michael interrupted her. No, she can't. She knew exactly what they were doing. And when I refused to be part of it. She told Victor. The tape went silent for a second. Then came a sound I will never forget. A slap. My mother's voice. You should have kept quiet. Outside, someone tried the cabin door. Locked. The handle rattled. I grabbed the cassette player and backed away. Dad's voice returned on the tape. Michael, leave town tonight. Michael answered. I can't. Evelyn and Emily are at home. Victor said. Then think about them before you talk. The tape cut. Static again. Then a new recording started. This time Dad sounded older. Years older. Daniel, if you're hearing this, then I am dead. I froze. This part was for me. I need you to understand something. Your mother did not kill Michael with her own hands. But she opened the door for the people who did. My eyes burned. I stayed because of you and Ryan. I told myself children needed their mother. I told myself I could protect everyone quietly. But silence has a price. Behind me, glass shattered. Someone had broken the back window. I ripped the cassette from the player and shoved it into my pocket. But Dad's final words had already played. Ryan knows where the rest is. The recording stopped. I turned around just as Victor stepped through the broken window. He raised both hands. I'm not here to hurt you. Then why chase me? Because your mother is desperate. And you aren't. He looked older up close. Not like a villain from a photograph. Like a man crushed by the weight of one mistake repeated for 23 years. Daniel, listen to me. That tape isn't the whole story. I laughed bitterly. Of course it isn't. No. I mean your father only had pieces. Then give me the rest. Victor looked toward the front door. Your mother was outside. I could hear her shouting my name. Victor lowered his voice. Ryan made a deal. My blood went cold. What deal? After your father found the original documents, Ryan helped hide them. Why would he do that? Victor's answer came quietly. Because your mother promised him the truth about you. The front door burst open. Mom stood there soaked from the rain. Her eyes locked on me. Not on Victor. Not on the broken glass. On my pocket. Give me the tape. I stepped back. No. Her face hardened. Daniel, you have no idea what that thing will do. I know enough. No, you don't. For the first time in my life, she looked genuinely afraid. That tape won't just destroy me. She swallowed. It will destroy Ryan too. Part 7, Ryan's Lie. I left the cabin with the tape still in my pocket. Not because my mother let me. Not because Victor helped me. But because the police arrived. Margaret had called them before I escaped through the tunnel. When the flashing lights appeared between the trees, Mom changed instantly. She stopped shouting. Stopped threatening. She became the grieving widow again. Soft voice. Trembling hands. Tears. Officer, my son is confused. His father died recently. He's been under so much stress. I almost admired how fast she became someone else. Victor said nothing. He just looked at me once, then walked away, as if he already knew the next part would hurt more than anything he could say. The police didn't arrest anyone that night. There was no violence they could prove. No stolen property they understood. Just a family argument in the rain. But I didn't go home. I drove straight to Ryan's apartment. It was almost 4 in the morning when he opened the door. He looked like he already knew. Did you hear it? I pushed past him. How long? He closed the door. Daniel, how long have you known? He didn't answer, so I screamed it. How long, Ryan? He flinched. Since I was 12. 12. I had been 5. He had carried this since childhood. Ryan sat at the kitchen table and covered his face with both hands. Dad didn't want me involved. But I heard them arguing. Mom was crying. Dad was shouting. Then he said Michael's name. I started asking questions. And Dad told you? Ryan shook his head. No. Mom did. That surprised me. She told me Dad was obsessed. That he blamed her for his friend's death because he couldn't accept an accident. She said if I ever helped him, I'd tear the family apart. I stared at him. And you believed her? I was 12. His voice cracked. She was my mother. Ryan stood and walked to his bedroom. He returned with a metal box. Inside were more documents. Original contracts. Bank statements. Copies of police reports. And a flash drive. Dad gave me this when I turned 18. He said if anything happened to him, I had to give it to a lawyer. Did you? Ryan looked away. No. Why? He didn't speak. Then I understood. What did Mom promise you? His jaw tightened. The truth about you. My chest tightened. What does that mean? Ryan's eyes filled with tears. For years, she told me you weren't Dad's son. The room went silent. She said if the truth came out, Dad would leave, you would be taken away, and our family would be destroyed. I felt like the floor had disappeared. Was it true? Ryan shook his head. No. Dad had a DNA test done when you were a baby. You were his. He knew. But Mom kept using that lie on me. Every time I got close to telling you anything. She reminded me I might lose my little brother. I couldn't speak. All those years I thought Ryan was distant because he didn't care. But he had been trapped. A child forced to guard adult secrets. A brother taught that silence was protection. Ryan opened the flash drive on his laptop. A folder appeared. Dad's name, Michael's name, Victor's name, and one more name. A name I had never seen before. Linda Carter. Who's that? Ryan swallowed. Mom's maiden name. Inside the folder was a scanned document. A company registration. Before marrying Dad, Mom had been listed as a silent partner in a shell company tied to Victor. That company had received money from illegal construction contracts. Michael found out. He threatened to expose them. The next day he died. Ryan clicked another file. A letter from Dad. Addressed to both of us. My sons. I made the worst mistake of my life by choosing peace over truth. I thought keeping your mother close would keep you safe. Instead, I taught you both to live inside a lie. Daniel, Ryan did not betray you because he hated you. He betrayed the truth because he loved you and was afraid. Do not let my cowardice turn you against each other. Ryan started crying before I did. For the first time since we were kids, I hugged my brother. Not because everything was forgiven. It wasn't. But because I finally understood. Then the laptop screen changed. A notification. Someone had accessed Ryan's cloud storage. files deleting, one by one. Ryan jumped up. No, no, no. Can you stop it? I'm trying. The folders vanished. Contracts, reports, letters, gone. Then one message appeared on the screen. From Mom. I warned you both. Ryan looked at me. She still has access. To what? Everything Dad stored digitally. I pulled the black cassette from my pocket. Not everything. Ryan stared at it, then shook his head slowly. That's not enough. Then what is? He opened the metal box again and removed one final envelope. It was sealed with Dad's initials. Ryan handed it to me. Dad said we should only open this if Mom destroyed the files. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a keycard and an address. Not a house, not a bank, a law office. At the bottom of the note, Dad had written, "The truth was never in the safe. The safe was only the map." Part 8, the last letter. The law office opened at 9. Ryan and I were there at 8:30. Neither of us had slept. We sat in the car, watching people walk past with coffees and briefcases, living normal lives. I envied them. They didn't know what it felt like to discover your childhood had been carefully edited by the people who raised you. At exactly 9, we walked inside. The receptionist looked at the keycard, then at our faces. Her expression changed. "You're Robert's sons." Ryan nodded. She stood immediately. "Mr. Harlan has been waiting for this day for a very long time." Mr. Harlan was Dad's lawyer, the same man who handed me the first envelope at the funeral. He looked tired when we entered. Not surprised. Tired. "I hoped your father would tell you himself." I placed the keycard on his desk. "He left this." Mr. Harlan nodded. "Then you're ready." He opened a private storage room behind his office. Inside sat a fireproof case. Not large, not dramatic, just a black metal case with Dad's initials on it. Mr. Harlan unlocked it. Inside were 3 things. A certified copy of every document Mom had destroyed, a signed confession from Victor Lawson, and one final letter from Dad. Victor's confession explained everything. The illegal contracts, the shell company, Mom's involvement before her marriage, Michael discovering the scheme, the threats, the staged accident. Victor claimed he had not been driving the car that forced Michael off the bridge. But he had arranged the meeting. He had made the threats. And my mother had told him where Michael would be that night. That was her role. One phone call, one location, one choice, a choice that ended a man's life. Mr. Harlan folded his hands. "Your father gave Victor a chance to confess years ago. Why didn't he?" "Because your mother had something on him too." "What?" "Proof that Victor's son was involved in the cover-up." Ryan whispered. "So everyone protected someone, Mr. Harlan nodded. "That's how secrets survive. No one keeps quiet for themselves. They keep quiet for the person they can't bear to lose." Then I opened Dad's final letter. His handwriting was weaker than in the others, like he wrote it near the end. "Daniel, Ryan, there are many things a father is supposed to give his sons. A safe home, a clear name, the courage to tell the truth. I failed at the last one. I convinced myself that exposing your mother would destroy you. So instead, I let her lies raise you. Ryan, you were only a boy. I am sorry I let you carry a man's burden. Daniel, I am sorry I let you grow up sensing something was wrong and believing the problem was you. It was never you." I had to stop reading. Ryan took the letter and continued. "Your mother loved you in the only way she understood love, by controlling what you were allowed to know. That is not protection. That is fear wearing a mother's face. When the truth comes out, people will tell you to forgive quickly because family is family. Do not listen to them. Forgiveness without truth is just another silence. Choose each other. Choose honesty. And if you remember me, do not remember the man who stayed quiet. Remember the man who finally left you the key." We gave everything to the police that afternoon. This time they listened. Maybe because the evidence was too complete. Maybe because Victor's confession named people still alive. Maybe because Dad had spent 23 years building a case no one could ignore. Victor was arrested first. My mother 2 days later. She called me once from a blocked number. I answered. For 10 seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I did everything to keep this family together." I replied, "No, you kept the lie together." She started crying. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't. I still don't know. Then she whispered, "Do you hate me?" I looked at Ryan sitting across from me. My brother. The person I thought had abandoned me. The person who had been trapped beside me all along. And I said, "I don't know yet." Then I hung up. Months passed. The newspapers called it a decades-old conspiracy. They wrote about contracts, corruption, hidden evidence, and a staged accident. But they didn't write about the quiet parts. They didn't write about birthdays where everyone smiled too carefully. They didn't write about two brothers growing up in the same house, separated by secrets they never chose. They didn't write about a father who was good enough to love us, but too afraid to save us from the truth. Ryan and I went back to the cabin in spring. The lake was calm. The trees were green again. For the first time in years, we fished from the old dock. Neither of us caught anything. Dad would have laughed. Before we left, I buried the brass key under the pine tree beside the cabin. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need it anymore. The door had already been opened. For most of my life, I thought secrets protected families. I thought silence meant peace. I thought love meant keeping people from pain. I was wrong. Sometimes the truth destroys the family you thought you had. But sometimes, it gives you the only real family you ever needed. My father left me a key. But he wasn't asking me to open a safe. He was asking me to open my eyes. And when I finally did, I lost the mother I thought I knew. I lost the father I thought was perfect. But I found my brother. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.